guys. I should have had this posted like 3 days ago, but I didn't like the way that I was filming them and answering questions and stuff like that. So, and then I got called into work, which is why it's taken me so long to do this. And I didn't, honestly, when I thought about doing this, I didn't think that so many people were going to want to see it. So, forgive me for the late posting, but to the 2 very sweet Anons who were so anxious to watch this, thank you for being patient with me. For those of you who don't know me, there's about 915 of you now. My name is Kayla. You can call me Kayla or Kayla Grace. I go by either. Grace is my middle name. So, thank you to all you who are watching this. I originally intended on doing this Q&A as my 700 follower celebration, something along that line. And then by a mere stroke of luck, I somehow managed to gain like 200 plus followers in the span of 2 or 3 months. So again, hi. I have written out all of these questions in this notebook, and disclaimer, I will not know all the answers to these, and I have a really hard time articulating myself. So by the time you watch this, if there is by chance something I didn't clarify enough or you don't understand, send me an ask, send me a message, leave it in the replies, and I will do my best to answer it for you. On top of all of this, I have a couple of things that I want to address that I will probably address after I answer these. So for all the people who sent me in questions, thank you. You have given me a lot to talk about. Some of these will be short, sweet, and to the point, and some of them will involve a little bit more elaboration, but we've got a lot to talk about. And apparently, like I said, there are people who want to hear what I have to say. So we'll start with number 1, work our way through the list, and then we'll get to the other stuff that I want to address. So here we go. Number 1, at High Council, Hannah. When is the right time to use Mandoa? For those of you who don't know what Mandoa is, it is the Mandalorian, native Mandalorian tongue from Mandalore, which is a part of the Star Wars universe. I am a multi-fandom blog. Most of you should know that by now, but I didn't really know what Mandoa was until I got into the Clone Wars, and I started writing for the Clone Wars. Hannah, for me, this is my own personal preference, and I don't read a lot of fic from other people who write for the clones. I need to, and we'll get to that later because I have something I want to say about that. But what I have read for people who write for the clones, most of the time Mandoa is used when you're referring to terms of endearment. All of you know the 2 C words that I'm not even going to try to pronounce because I'm not bilingual. The 2 C words that most people use for Mandoa in Clone Wars fics. So my thing, and I'm guilty of it too, because there's so few terms of endearment in Mandoa. I try to vary in what I use as my terms of endearment, but I find that for me, at least, when I use Mandoa is when character A is talking to character B, if they're in a pre-established relationship or are about to be in an established relationship. It's often meant, I use it not just on top of that, but for moments of vulnerability. Probably my favorite times to use Mandoa is with the clones who are a little harder on the outside. So like Wolf, I love writing Wolf talking in Mandoa because it's him embracing who he is, and I feel like that he as a character would have a hard time doing that, especially after Corman losing his eye to Asajj. I hope that answers that. And again, for all of these questions, if I don't make sense, please tell me. I mean, really, please tell me, because I want to help you get better. Okay, I'm just going back and forth here because I have a lot of these. Michaela at Kenobi, there are 2 of them. Your favorite thing about writing fics, and how do you get into the zone? I'm going to answer the zone question first. A lot of people I know who write do different things. But for me, if it's a fic that's on Tumblr, I write 2 different types of fics. I write fics on Tumblr and I write fics on Archive of Our Own. The ones I write on Archive of Our Own are also on another website that I've been on since I was about 12 or 13, that are OCs. But when I'm on Tumblr, I write reader inserts. The way that I get into the zone, so to speak, is by listening to music that I can incorporate to the fic. So my first example I can think of for this, a lot of you, and I wasn't expecting this fic to get so much feedback or reads or whatever you want to refer to it as, loved my Obi-Wan fic, Take Us Back, which I actually had originally planned to base it off of a different song. But when I was given that prompt for the Reiko Hardeen arc, which I've already written for my own OC, immediately, because I'm a music arts student, okay? I was a music arts student in high school. So my brain, on top of all of the stuff I know about writing, is also a giant radio. So when I got that prompt, the first song that I thought of was The Night We Met by Lord Huron. So I guess, Michaela, for this particular question, the way that I get into the zone depends on the fic, but most of the time it's by listening to music. And if I really need to focus, it will either be 2 things. It will be a song that relates to the fic, case in point, The Night We Met with Take Us Back, or Sleeping at Last. If any of you don't know who Sleeping at Last is, I will give you a personal recommendation list of all of this guy's songs, because between him and Tommy Prophet, those 2 are probably in my top 3 favorite artists of all time. And the best way I can describe Sleeping at Last specifically, because I've been listening to him for like 6 years now, if you want music that puts your soul at peace, he's it. If you want Sleeping at Last recommendations, ask me in the replies, or in an ask, or in a DM. I have loads of songs to give you for him. But Michaela, zone, music. Your favorite thing about writing fics is part 2 to this question. I didn't address this in the beginning of the video, but I have been writing just in general since I was 5. I'm gonna be 22 in July, okay? So I've been doing this for a really long time, but I didn't start writing until, or writing online, forgive me. I didn't start writing online until I was 12. And like a year later, I got Tumblr. So I've been online in a writing kind of community, I guess you can refer to it as that, since I was young. A lot of my fics, I really seem to gravitate towards characters who don't get the stories that I want them to get in their respective shows and movies. And what I mean by that is, for those of you who follow me for, let's say, Supernatural, because I've gained a couple of those in the last couple of weeks too. Castiel, I have never adored a character more in my life than I have him, Carol Peltier from The Walking Dead, Rowena McLeod, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Ahsoka Tano. Those 5 are probably in my top 5 favorite fictional characters of all time. There's different reasons for all of them, but in this case, Castiel has been treated like dirt in Supernatural. And I'm gonna get really controversial here. There are probably gonna be things throughout this entire video that you're not gonna wanna hear or you're not gonna like. I'm telling you for a reason. I love Supernatural. I came into the show really, really late. I came in right after the season 12 finale aired. And from the get-go, when I started watching it, because it took me a while to get into it, I just adored Cass. he's got so much depth to him that is just, I love him, okay? And especially, like, scattered throughout the seasons, I could give you different reasons why I love him. But because he tends to be a scapegoat, or the person who sacrifices himself for the Winchesters, which, excuse me, personally I hate, because it kind of puts him on a back burner. If Sam and Dean are up here, Castiel's back here. And a lot of people don't realize that if it wasn't for Castiel to begin with, Sam and Dean would still be stuck in hell, okay? But because he is often used as, they say he's a main, right? But they don't use him as a main character. He's often sidelined. And when I watched the show through the first time, that really bothered me. So I decided that I was going to write a fic for him. And this is, to this day, the longest fic I've ever written. It's currently sitting at 705 pages, and I started it in August of 2017, okay? When I started it, I was on season 4, right before season 13 aired. Season 15 is on hiatus at the moment, and I'm just now getting into season 8A, okay? So it's taken me a really long time. But my favorite thing about writing this fic and putting my own OC into this fic is the fact that I get to give him something that the show didn't. So Michaela, to answer this specific question about your favorite thing about writing fics, my favorite thing about writing fics is the untold stories. The ones that I get to come up with myself, or I get to come up with and then add on to the already existing story. That's probably my favorite thing about every fic I've ever written, is to give these characters the endings or the happiness that their respective shows and movies won't give them. Okay. Next question, at Max Strut. How do you make your writing sound realistic? I had an Anon recently send me something similar to this, so I'm going to mash them together. I'm going to use Star Wars for this again. The best way, and this goes for all you writers out there who are watching this video, the best way to make your writing, especially if it's Star Wars, sound realistic, do your research. I cannot tell you how much research I have had to do about Star Wars. And most people who are writers, who are, you know, if I'm up here, because I've been doing it for so long, most people who are up here with me will tell you the same thing. You don't have to abide by canon. Me and Abby and Ren in particular, we have a motto in our little writer group. We talk to each other frequently. We say screw canon all the time. I still abide by that most of the time because I don't like the way that the Clone Wars ended. I thought Victory and Death was beautiful, but I got so attached to the clones after 3 months of being in the fandom that I just decided to say, hey, I'm going to write every single fix-it fic I could think of because I don't want to acknowledge the fact that all the clones died. That's a totally different story. But how do you make your writing sound more realistic? Do your research. And if you are a novice Star Wars writer, a master Star Wars writer, whatever, who needs research references, ask me. I've got loads of stuff saved on this account specifically for this purpose. If you need help, my ask box is always open. Do your research. I promise you it will make everything so much easier. Like everything so much easier. Bear with me, okay? My throat is sore and I'm really tired. Trying to do the easiest to the hardest questions. Let me see what else I've got here. Okay. His Little Grace. This was actually one of my favorite ones I got. What's a piece you felt has impacted you while you wrote it? I have 2 of them. For those of you who are in the Supernatural fandom, my favorite character outside of Castiel is Rowena. I am a massive fan of the way Ruth Condell plays Rowena, and Ruth in herself is just such a phenomenal human being. I love her. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen season 15 yet. Supernatural kills people off all the time. I mean, all the time. They kill people off all the time. So when you watch Supernatural at its start, you're like, oh crap, my fave just died. Yeah, don't worry about that. They're going to be back at some point. But that being said, so season 15A, Rowena is killed for the 3rd time in The Rupture. I have the video of myself watching this episode. She dies, but her death in this specific episode is just so much more brutal, because compared to the first 2 times that she dies, this time she dies on her own terms. And that was so traumatizing to me that I cried for days. I mean, I was just, and like I said, Rowena's one of my top 5 favorite characters of all time, so it was devastating for me to have to watch that. But after I watched it, I don't remember how I got to this point, but my best friend is Brazilian, fluent in Portuguese, and I found this article of untranslatable words, and one of them was saudade. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Portuguese speakers, I'm sorry. But it translates to, based off of what she told me, longing for what's lost. And I thought to myself, this sounds like something I could write for a really good Rowena piece. When I wrote that, most of the fics that I write, the short ones on Tumblr, most of the fics I write, depending on the prompt, will take me about, if I'm motivated, an hour, maybe. I've written pieces in 20 minutes. Had I not taken so many breaks that day I wrote this fic, I would have been writing it for at least 4 or 5 hours, because I needed a way to cope with what happened. And the further I got, the more my brain gave me ideas for. So by the time I finished it, I read it over and I kept looking at it, and I was just like, this is arguably the best thing that I have ever written. And I still believe it to this day. And there are 2 things that I'm particularly proud of, but I was so proud of how I had written this fic that when I went to year 2 of university, I rewrote it into 3rd person and turned it in for a grade for my writing course. And my professor loved it. She gave me 100. You can turn fanfics in for a grade for your writing courses. Just, depending on the school and depending on the professors, whatever, ask them. I asked her and she was totally fine with it, but you have to leave some type of a disclaimer on it, so that way you're able to tell, or the professors are able to know that the characters aren't your own. But so I was so proud of not just the way that I wrote it, but how much of myself I had poured into it as a way of coping with what had happened to Rowena on Supernatural. And it was devastating. I wrote it so well, and I loved it. And even after she was brought back as Queen of Hell, that's probably one of my greatest writing accomplishments, is Saudade. But Keeper I started in May of 2019. I was not a Game of Thrones fan, guys. You couldn't pay me to watch Game of Thrones. I knew what it was in 2014, I think. My best friend at the time said I would never watch it because of all the sex. And at the time she was right. And when I went through it on my own, I ended up skipping over all the sex because it's just not my thing. But anyway, so when I started, the pilot was right after The Bells had aired. And I don't remember if I had known about Jamie at that point, but I was led to the bathtub scene at Harrenhal. And I don't know about you, but I have been drawn to broken characters since I started fandom in itself. I have always been drawn to broken characters and just